really like your presentation, but the question that came to mind is when you talk about control, the flip side of control is actually certainty, i.e. you're certain in terms of or the control provides you with some level of certainty. What happens to my coins to the extent I should pass away? You can, it is subject to whatever my estate. Can they basically assign that to someone else? There are rules that basically apply. It's the same way in terms of holding the currency. You can actually have custody contracts that are respected in law. How do you view that in terms of the tension, the lack of certainty that currently exists, and how do you think that will kind of, how will it work through the system as it all develops over time?
Like this. But notice, I mean, that looks pretty chaotic, right? But if you look at the mean, sorry, mathematician. Way forward. So yeah, there's gyrations. Of course there's gyrations. But then there was the gyrations when we had the internet. Today we take it for granted. Back then there was a gigantic bubble. If you attached .com to anything, you were funded and you were good to go. Then we had the crash. So then we had the real estate crash. So we do have gyrations. We're having gyrations here. But certainty will come as more of the space is defined, and the regulatory agencies, you heard me say it, are actually doing a good job in providing that level of certainty so you can fly the plane at a level field. I mean, at the end of the day, you want the pilot to fly the plane in somewhat of a steady manner, otherwise you'd be like, oh my God, he's going up and down, he's really sick. So equated to like an airplane going up and down right now, but as long as it keeps moving in this direction and doesn't crash or hit the stratosphere, you're kind of fine. That is in air by a contract, by a piece of paper called a will, or any other structure that you utilize that has been in place. Auto applies to any and all crypto. Unless you're getting creative that it should automatically, the minute you die, it should transfer to their phone, you're getting a little too creative. But if you do it in the standard manner, same thing applies. Your Binance account goes straight to somebody who's your heir. Done.
Do you see any countries getting ahead of crypto or embracing it? Do you hear about Korea or China clamping down? Do you see countries in the horizon that be big players in the crypto space?
Yes. Yes. So it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a challenge in both directions, because just countries that are ahead of it as far as their understanding, that's the most important thing. Japan, Belarus, so the Eastern European countries have taken on. Bulgaria, actually, the government wound up doing a drug seize and wound up with a bunch of Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin's valuation increased to the point where it eliminated half of their deficit, the country's deficit.
So the country held on to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, so they're still holding on to it. They got it, they seized it in some drug bust or something. They have it. I mean, I was just in Bulgaria, and I mean, the country's, it's got its challenges. It's got depopulation, everybody's running to Europe. So that was fantastic. I mean, half of their deficit is done. Something should take out a half of our deficit, and we'd be in a fantastic place until a few years when the politicians bring it back up again. But, and they can, even though ours is in the trillions. So some countries, like China specifically, China has a lot of Bitcoin holdings, or the residents of China have a lot of Bitcoin holdings. So if you want to be like, yes, and then go ho-hum about decentralization, recognize that Bitcoin holdings in China are significant, effectively giving Chinese more control over what happens in Bitcoin space than the rest of us. So that's called the by default decentralization model that nobody anticipated, but they had cheap powers in the minding.
The miners can be third-party entities doing this work. How do they play into the overall equation and preserve the integrity of the transaction? That's one of the things is emphasized that it is very safe and less susceptible to frauds and so forth. How does it play that the miners can still do the work and not really affect the integrity of the transaction?
Well, I mean, the miners are essential The challenge comes in when the miners themselves have too much control. So the miners wind up having too much control. There's currencies that try to address that challenge. The one that handles it most superiorly, in a most superior manner, that from my perspective is Decred. So they built a system where it's not just the miners that are in control, there's stakeholders that also have a say. So it's called the evolution, right? It's called hybridization. That's what's happening in the space where there are coins that are coming up that can be seen as the promise of Bitcoin fulfilled, rather than it being challenged, because miners have an oversized role in any of these coins where it's only miner based. So like there's Decred, there's New York Coin, there's all these other few coins that out there that address some of the situations that Bitcoin is in, and will find a hard challenge to get out of because of that perception where it's digital gold, and it's going to take a lot to unturn it.
Is mining also done for like a contract type of blockchain application? Like if say buyers and sellers and this contract is based on blockchain technology, who does the encryption, decryption? Is that the same entity, the peers, or they can utilize services of the miner?
Well, I mean, if you're gonna, that would be the equivalent of a blockchain on top of a blockchain, right? Because you're doing contracts, smart contracts, based off of a blockchain. So you have the underlying blockchain doing its job, and on top you could have some sort of structure. I think Ethereum comes close to that, giving you that capacity. Ethereum is changing in its own ways right now. You know, proof of stake, proof of work. So there are, that would be effectively like a blockchain. So the short answer is yes. The beauty of blockchain is anything can be adjusted and accordingly to put to service. However, only time and testing will provide whether it actually works. So duration time duration is important, because that's when you work out the bugs. You cannot solve all of the problems. Like I said, Satoshi Nakamoto could not have anticipated that it would turn into digital gold. That certainly wasn't the whole concept behind it. So, changes. Anybody else?
What do you, I guess, how do you see the future of miners? See, you know, you have thousands of shit coins out there that are undoubtedly going to drop out, go to zero eventually, which is it's going to push a lot of GPU miners into the longevity coins, which is undoubtedly going to increase difficulty, which at a time when rewards are lessening, you have people fighting over more and more, less coin.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so like any other space, if you notice that when you're in a space, you start out here, there are very few miners. I know some miners in the space in Bitcoin where they were able to mine from their home computer back in the day, 1,000 Bitcoin. You know, so then what happened? Can you do that now? No, because the space became that much bigger. And then there comes a point where it becomes so big that it needs a correction. So that correction will come and reduce the number of players in the space based on reduced rewards. I mean, Bitcoin will be there rather quickly. Some of these other coins will have that. So a morphing, if you walk away with anything from this, it should be that the space is dynamic and it's changing faster than you're acclimating to it. So recognize that the space is quite swiftly changing, and this mining will adjust to that right size here, right? Eventually, because right now there's money in it, so everybody and their mother is jumping into mining. But then eventually it'll come down to a right-sized model for whatever promising coins, because remember the shit coins will effectively be taken out by the regulatory agencies, and by just all of us becoming more and more attuned to crypto, will say, no, that's a shit coin, I don't want to hear about it. So some of these will just go away on their own, not even needing the regulatory agencies. So then there'll be this right space that comes along, and then within it will come some new coins like Decred, New York Coin, and these guys will take over the space, and then the miners will attract that, inflate that, and then get adjusted too. So it'll keep having these type of points, but it'll start operating within a band.
In the encryption process, what I understand is mathematical equations, quite complex, are being used. And I believe one of the criteria is a number of leading zeros and so forth is created. Who defines those with respect to each encryption?
Well, they're defined when the original code is written. So
that's an application specific. If it is defined certain ways, that it will always use that equation?
yes. The methodology is determined at inception, and then of course it operates within a set of parameters.
That can be changed or adjusted?
Well, no, if it can be adjusted, then you've destroyed the whole model, right? Because then the whole reason why we're like in Bitcoin, the people in there, because you don't want too many changes, that hence is called a fork. Like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, are all a function of forks where people came together and said, no, we're going to do something a little different. So then you have to redefine it as different. You cannot have that same thing change.
As an example, I've read about many leading zeros. What's an example of many? Would be like 10, 15, 100 leading zeros when the final thing comes up. Because each peer or the entity has to encrypt, whoever does the fastest gets accepted by the other nodes in the network.
Yeah.
So if that happens, usually any idea like how complex that gets in the computational method?
Not necessarily. I mean, you know, the blockchain, if you've read Satoshi Nakamoto's paper, it will define the structure of blockchain and how it operates quite eloquently. Frankly, quite eloquently, considering, you know, an average person can get an idea of, like, wow, you know, this works. So, no, you just basically have a set of parameters and it operates under that.
You mentioned in your early days that you were a young Wall Street banker and you had a foresight, or at least the guts maybe, to go into Bitcoin far ahead of the others. And you didn't stick it out, others did, you saw the results. And you also mentioned assimilation, how it's more than evident now with cryptocurrency funds and so forth. So are you now going to be the pioneer on the ICO front and say, well, I can't miss this again, and not give up as you suggested, and be an investor on the cryptocurrency side the same way you were with it?
I mean, generally, I'm a value investor. I don't necessarily chase ICOs unless I know the entire team. If I'm on the board, then I know the team really well. So if I want to put some money behind it, that's another way to go behind it. But for the record, I kind of actually walked away from the space myself too after not being able to get funding for my project, you know, tagging of assets. I was like, you know what, maybe this needs time. We all thought it was going to take a lot longer time than this happened. We all got blindsided, you know, that how fast this happened. Because right now, if somebody was saying, oh, you know, there's a new company, there's a guy named Satoshi Nakamoto, and he's built flying cars. So all of us are basically the proponents of it and advocates for these flying cars. So we meet once a week, twice a week, and we're like, yeah, flying cars in the future. But in the back of our mind, we're like, how much time? 10 years, 20 years, probably somewhere in that time frame. So we were kind of blindsided too that it happened so quickly, so efficiently. Now some people will say, oh, well, I knew it all the time. Okay. But, you know, it's always good in hindsight to predict the past. But
So ultimately, the right ICO scenario you would look into, rather, as an investor or maybe on the board or both.
yeah, I mean, if the foundation of your question is, well, which ICOs do I go into, where do I want to be? I would say that the mediums of exchange that offer some promise are the ones that you should be going towards. You know, like I said, like some coins that are out there that offer something better or different, a different approach is what you should be looking at. So like Decred offers that, New York Coin offers that. So you can look at those, you can look at others, but recognize that if you're going to, it's just like investing in any other company, folks. I mean, if you're going to be like, okay, it's in crypto, so somehow it must have an explosion. No, it may not. You know, blockchain is not for everything. Just like, you know, desk.com didn't have a future. Just because you attach a .com to the end of it doesn't mean it had a future, and most of them collapse. So the same thing will happen here, because just nowadays, I think Kodak started like blockchain. They put blockchain and then their stock exploded, right? It spiked. So just any company, Wall Street company or any other company that attaches blockchain, all of a sudden, like, well, it's like some cabbage company out there that puts blockchain future. It's not going to be the case. I mean, if you're in agriculture, the damn thing is going to be stable. Unless you're in seed and you want to track who's got your seed, so maybe Monsanto.
Supply chain management.
Yeah, so like if there's some aspect of ledger that you need, then yes, good. So accordingly, but then you run into the other problem. The idea may be fantastic, but then, oops, you better get to know these people too. So, the beauty of this, and I'm not saying I'm a proponent, I'm one of the people who suffered through having to deal with, angel investors and everything like that. But the beauty of this system is that it gives you the time to get to know your team and build your team and fine-tune and try different things. And this ICO, where we have 7,000 of these, they didn't get this opportunity. So they don't even know each other enough, And once you put money into the equation, as you know, money isn't just an amplifier, right? Money amplifies who you really are. That's all it does. If you're a great person, you'll be an awesome person with more money, because you'll be like more charitable. But if you're a nasty person, let's say, then you're going to become even nastier, right? You'll be like, I'm the man, everybody below me, bow down. So money's just an amplifier, and this amplification may or may not work towards your advantage. Generally, it won't. So be careful.
All right, I think this will be the end of it. And get one more applause for Jayden. Maybe like 1 minute. I feel like you guys have a lot of knowledge coming in from blockchain and crypto. And stay tuned with our events. Thank you very much.